Okay, so I'm going to respect everyone's time, and I know that you guys want to rush off soon to your sessions. That's the reason you're here. So we're going to get started. I see pretty much everybody is coming in out of the hallway. Wow, what an impressive crowd. This is the largest we've had since beginning this technical assistance and training event. So this is quite impressive. So good morning and welcome to everyone to the 11th Annual Grantee Training and Technical Assistance Meeting for Runaway and Homeless Youth Programs. The Runaway and Homeless Youth Program is administered by the Family and Youth Services Bureau. We are a bureau within the Administration for Children and Families under the Department of Health and Human Services. So if you know anything about feds, you know we love acronyms. So I'm going to start by giving you the acronyms that I will be using. So it won't be a test at the end, don't worry. And so as you know, Runaway and Homeless Youth, the acronym is RHY. I'll use HHS, which is the Department of Health and Human Services. I may even talk about ACF, which is the Administration for Children and Families. And what I heard is that over half of our participants are new to this technical assistance event. So I just kind of wanted you to know where your program lies within the Department of Health and Human Services. And so that's our parent agency, and we're under the Administration for Children and Families, ACF. So when you hear those acronyms bandied about throughout the week, you'll know what we're speaking of. And I don't have to give you these acronyms because you are the RHY experts, but I will, just in case. BCP is the Basic Center Program, SOP is the Street Outreach Program, and TLP is our Transitional Living Program. And of course, another form of TLP is the MGH, that's the Maternity Group Home. And so that will help me glide through my presentation because I don't have to tell you what I'm talking about now as I glide through my remarks. And so welcome to Kansas City, known for its barbecue, which I've had lots and lots of over the last 2 days. The jazz, which I'm still waiting to find and hear, so if you have any suggestions, let me know. And for being one of 10 of HHS regional cities. This event will provide opportunity to connect with and collaborate with your partners. In the Kansas City metro region, there are 6 RHY programs. Hopefully some of you took advantage of the site visits to 2 of them yesterday, and we will also repeat those site visits for those of you who did not have the opportunity on Wednesday. We had the Restart program, which is, has a BCP and a TLP. The Synergy Services has a BCP and a TLP. And Synergy Services also has, that's a little bit out in the metro area, a SOP and an MGH, which is in a place called Parkville. While I'm speaking directly to the more than 700 of you who were able to join us here in Kansas City, I am also reaching out through you to all of the programs funded by FSBE, the only federal agency with the primary goal of ending youth homelessness. This includes, give yourself a hand. This includes our this includes our newly funded SOP, BCP, TLP, and MGH programs, newly funded with awards last month in FY 2017, and we have a list of all of our grantees on our website. So take a look. In case there are new ones popping up in places near you, so you can reach out and partner and share information. So through these workshops, general sessions, and poster session meet and greets, as well as the unstructured time available for connecting with your peers, you'll have the opportunity to meet, to talk, and hopefully collaborate over the next 3 days. And that's the important piece, that collaboration, that networking, that partnering. Find a peer that may have a similar program as yours in a similar geographic location, so you can just kind of pick up the phone and kind of ask, for some mentoring and some coaching sometimes. That's a perfect opportunity to learn more about our program. We also want you to learn about some proven and promising practices and approaches, and to share with one another any promising approaches that you feel have worked really well with the populations that you are serving. So I was going to do an exercise that I really hate, so I'm not going to do it anymore. So I was going to have all of you, one of those touchy-feely moments, stand up and look at your partner. And then when you're at church, grab your hand, but nobody's not gonna do that. So what I was going to do is kind of show you the connection that we have in the room by asking, the BCPs and the SOPs and the TLPs to stand up. But I think that you realize that everybody in this room is doing the same type of work that you're doing, so you are all connected. Think about that power, to have the connection of 700 people out there working together with one another, talking to each other and listening to the different approaches that have worked with our young people. Those of you here today and each of the programs that you represent indirectly and directly have more than FISB program and funding in common. Our programs share a belief that youth must have power in their lives to act in partnership with our program staff rather than being recipients of services, passive recipients of services. We acknowledge and value their past learning and their experiences and the importance of youth. Also taking the responsibility for their own lives and growth into adult preparation, self-sufficiency, and independence. And that's what we're there for. What we've heard from our youth, and we have talked to and surveyed over, thousands of youth over the years since 1974. And what they've always told us, most of them, is that, that person believed in me, and she made me believe in myself. So we know the power of a quality adult in our young people's lives. And you may not see yourself as that, but that's what you serve. You serve as an anchor for our young people to have their belief system be rebuilt within themselves. So you are awesome. You do a great job. We talk about at FISB that you are our heroes. We're at the central office in the federal bureaucracy of DC, but we don't have direct service experience. You guys do. And so we depend on you and we appreciate you. RH programs also share a growing capacity to implement trauma-informed services and practices. This includes assessments helping us identify the needs of individual youth as well as the trends and changing needs among runaway and homeless youth as a group. And as a result, develop more effective services and opportunities for them. The implementation of trauma-informed care with prevention and intervention that acknowledges the trauma that our homeless youth experience in disproportionate numbers and the effect of the trauma on the youth's capacity to respond in a healthy way to current stressors or crises. It further includes a greater understanding of the needs of specific groups within the RHY population, including those experiencing specific kind of trauma: human trafficking, commercial sexual exploitation, those whose identities that put them at risk for negative community responses and perhaps greater discrimination, and the different nature of rural and urban RHY youth, the types of programming that can best reach out to them. The Domestic Victims of Human Trafficking Demonstration Project, which had 2 cohorts begun in 2014, is soon wrapping up. Engaging the Host Home Project of Mountain Plain Youth Services in Bismarck, North Dakota, the Multnomah County Violence and Human Trafficking Program in Portland, Oregon, and Responding to Human Trafficking in Montana, a project of Tumbleweed Runaway program based in Billings. Over the past 2 years, these 3 programs have supported more than 200 victims of human trafficking, the majority of them being runaway and homeless youth. Well, there are many successes that I read about in this program. We have a draft brief. It's not final yet, but I wanted to highlight one that seemed really simple, but an amazing byproduct in Multnomah County. This was the creation of a county-wide collaborative guide distributed to all organizations serving victims of human trafficking. Imagine every organization in a community the size of Portland and Multnomah County working from the same set of principles on a collaborative crisis response to human trafficking. I find that a best practice, and I say replicate, replicate, replicate. And so we plan to have that project brief on our website very soon. I'm really excited about that. And shortly, FISB will be issuing the final report on the Support Systems for Rural Homeless Youth demonstration project, identifying the work of RHY programs for rural youth in 6 states. And I know you've heard about this project for many years. The last project ended in 2016, and so we're really excited about that. The demonstration project targeted young people ages 16 to 21 in rural areas, including tribal lands and other rural Native communities who are approaching independence and young adulthood, but have few or no connections to a supportive family structure or community. Rural youth experiencing homelessness, as well as the service agencies that support them, face a number of unique challenges. And I think that it was important that we name some of them, because I want you to understand that we realize, even though we're back in DC, that rural youth have unique challenges. And that's why we are putting together technical assistance this year as well to speak directly to how we best serve those youth. These youth are relatively invisible to community policymakers and service providers. Rural communities are typically facing no or low employment opportunities, no or negative population growth, and aging housing infrastructure, as well as fewer community resources, including public transportation. And the rural youth are at particularly high risk because so many of them, not like their urban counterparts, often have little to do and nowhere to go for affordable, accessible activities. The Rural Demonstration Project enables states to explore ways to improve the delivery of services and supports to youth in rural communities who have little or no connection to stable housing and family situations, including runaway and homeless youth, as well as youth making unsuccessful transitions out of foster care. I think it will be a powerful, powerful read. RHY programs also share responsibility to bring youth voices to the table in local, state, and national efforts to end homelessness. FISB plays and has played a lead role in the efforts to effectively serve homeless youth. This is an essential role that more than 2 million youth are affected by each year. And I think about that, and that gives me a snapshot of the power. And actually, we are involved in looking at the prevalence of the youth homelessness in this country, and we're going to have a Chapin Hall speaker on the last day, so I'm hoping you're going to stick around for that, to give you a report out of what they found in their research on the prevalence of youth homelessness. But it even says that it's more than 2 million, 2.8 million actually was what the data says. We're still trying to get the exact numbers, but I'm hoping you'll stick around for that, because I think you're going to be quite surprised with what Chapin Hall found. Being in a unique position as the only federal agencies whose primary charge is to end youth homelessness, you as FISB grantees have a heightened responsibility to assure that circumstances and unique needs of homeless youth are on the radar of other service providers and community collaborative efforts. Our programs are now active in local and regional continuums of care throughout the country. Oh, that's right, I didn't give you that one, COC. Freudian slip, wonder why. Okay, typically with experience in serving homeless adults and families, not with youth. So they need you to help them better understand how more effectively to address the unique needs of runaway and homeless youth. And sometimes partnerships are really hard. We find that, you guys do it better out in the local areas than we do it in DC. But I want you to understand the importance of the partnerships that you should establish with the continuums of care, because those are our connections to be make sure that our young people get opportunities they haven't had in the past. So it's hard, but we've talked to many of the COCs, and they want to do it. They want to do a better job, but they need you as experts to help them. So please see them as your partners, in the efforts to delay and end youth homelessness. The RHY programs are engaging with their local coordinated entry efforts, giving youth access to services historically beyond their reach due to eligibility criteria that limit their access and lack of community understanding about the number of affected youth and scope of their needs. Through the 100-day challenge to end homelessness, we teamed up with A Way Home America and the Rapids Result Institute to identify and execute innovative practices to end youth homelessness. I also want to mention one more thing that RHY grantees share. You share the support of FISB. our staff, and through multiple training, technical assistance, and resource partners. We are out there with you. We're in DC, but we are connected to you, and we want to help you as much as we can through we call it RHYTAC, Runaway and Homeless Youth Training and Technical Assistance Center. You'll hear that a lot. And you'll see that the amazing staff that are staffed by RHYTAC, it's Safe Place, and you will see them around the conference. They do a great job every year. We support you not only with TA, we also have looked at our monitoring tool. And we've heard from you often that it's very cumbersome and very, very regulated. And so we have streamlined that monitoring tool to be, to replace the old one, to kind of increase the consistency across our programs when our peers and our federal project officers come to your organizations. We want it to be a help to you. Not just telling you the things that you're not doing well, but to also have an opportunity to capture some of the quality of your approaches and to share them throughout our network. And so I'm hoping that over the next year you will see the difference in our monitoring. We have some amazing staff. We have some amazing regional program managers that we hired a year or more ago, and they are going to be out there hoping to let you know that we appreciate what you do, and we're just not out here checking the boxes. We really want to know what you're doing well, and we really want to share your approaches. So a couple more things that I'd like to share with you, because as we all know, this is National Runaway Prevention Month. And every year we take this opportunity to raise awareness of youth homelessness, to wear green in support of those youth who are struggling, and to recommit ourselves to this essential work. At FISB, we have a few important things to share with you about this month. First, the 2016 National Runaway Safeline Crisis Contacts Report, which summarizes the data from a year's worth of calls to the National Runaway Safeline. This is a critical source of information on the demographics, the geography, and obstacles of the youth population who are struggling with running away or being homeless. We're hoping this information will be an assistance to you in our continuing efforts to be responsive to the needs of our runaway and homeless youth. Next, a new infographic, Street Youth, a snapshot of their experiences in 11 U.S. cities, based on a 2013 survey of 656 young people who are experiencing homelessness. The survey results were formalized with the release of the 2016 Street Outreach Report Data Collection Study. This is a fascinating and informative study, and this infographic is a poster-sized introduction to the backgrounds and experiences of young people on the street. So you can find both of those resources on the FISB website under the Runaway and Homeless Youth Program. So I really encourage you to go to our website. Encourage your peers to go to the website. There's so much information there that we are unable to tell you about every single day. But that website belongs to you. It's for you, it's developed only for you, and we really want you to take advantage of the website. So please visit it and use some of the resources and the tools that you will see. So next, you will hear from our new Associate Commissioner for the Family and Youth Services Bureau, William, this is a mouthful, Wubenhorst. I can't even find an acronym for that. So it's William Wubenhorst, okay? And so I'm going to read a little bit about William from his bio. I'm not going to read the whole bio because it's very extensive and it is in your program. So at your leisure, please take an opportunity to kind of check William out and see all the wonderful things he's done. So, William has worked in state government and consulted with this. Oh, no pressure. Okay, and so William has worked in state government and consulted with state and federal governments for almost 30 years. During this time, he has also served as a consultant and researcher of faith-based and community organizations. Previously, Mr. Wubenhorst served a total of 13 years as a senior management consultant and return on investment specialist for ICF International and Macro International. He specialized in developing ROI, return on investment measures, for federal government programs that assist low-income and at-risk populations. During this time, he provided technical assistance to federal grantees funded through the U.S. Department of Labor, Department of Health and Human Services, and the Cooperation for National and Community Services. And he served as project director for training and technical assistance to the 98 National Responsible Fatherhood grantees funded through the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Children and Families. And so I'm going to skip down and just give you a brief personal snapshot of William. He attended Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, and received a BA in Intercultural Studies. He received an MBA with a concentration in public and nonprofit management. And he also got some kind of award for that too, but I'll let you read that. From Boston University. William has been married over 31 years to Alfreda Alvarez, and they have 2 adult children. And so even though William has not been with us very long, just a very short time, I'm going to give you my observation of William. He just said, uh-oh. And so he'd be surprised, and for you who know me, I'm a very straightforward, it's no gray with me, it's black and white, I just tell you, and if you hate me for a couple of days, it's okay. So, but what I have witnessed since William has come to FISB, I've witnessed his passion, his empathy, his compassion, and his understanding of the work that we do, which is so inspiring to me because often we get new leadership that takes months and months to really value our program principles. But William has shown himself to be a champion. He is so protective of our program and you. You will hear that passion come across in everything that William says about the RHY programs. So I'm excited about having a leader that values his staff, that values the grantees, and that value the young people and the families that we serve. So I, without further ado, will allow William to, you heard that? Allow William to come. Wow. I'm the career fed, so I'm in charge, really, So thank you, William, for your compassion and your respect of all the federal staff since you've been here. William Wilberhorst.
Thank you, Debbie. It's great to be here, and you'll see some of the things I say might sound a little different from what Debbie says, but we're working it out, so don't worry about that. First of all the RHYTAC staff, can you wave your hands in the air like you just don't care? If you're in here, where are they? There's one there. Where's Lori? Lori, stand up. RHYTAC, are you all standing up? Well, let's give them a warm hand. They do a great job. In preparation for this, I read the conference evaluations from the previous 2 years, and they're all great. And your energy comes out even in a conference evaluation. I mean, it's just there in the comments, in the responses. So I knew this was going to be a fun few days. And the RHY staff, would you all stand, please? Debbie? Oh, FISB too. Now, all of you who are executive directors, would you raise your hands? No, stay standing, RHY. All of you executive directors, raise your hand. I have to apologize to all of you because these are my staff and you can't have them. In the words of MC Hammer, can't touch this. Thank you. I really do like my staff a lot. They have the same energy and passion. For the portion of them that work in the Beltway, keep us in your prayers. You have really hard work to do. We have our own special kind of hard work to do. If anyone's worked in the Beltway, it can be an alternate universe of sorts. But we'll get to some of that. So, before I took this job, it just so happened, of course I don't believe in coincidence, but I did a study on assessing the impact of faith-based organizations on homelessness. We focused on adults and families. We didn't have the time and resources to get into youth homelessness, but that was my first exposure in terms of homelessness issues, learned a lot, and then next thing I know, I'm running FISBE, and one of the programs is Runaway and Homeless Youth. So I did, get some exposure. I've done, as Debbie said, I have an MBA with a concentration in public and nonprofit management, which is truly an oxymoron, because an MBA, you learn to, organize off of a bottom line. Everything is about managing to a bottom line. And then I choose to work in environments that have no bottom line whatsoever. So just so you know, I didn't come from the private sector with an MBA making widgets to come to this job, and that I'm going to turn all of you into widgets, okay? Just don't be afraid of me because I'm an MBA. But the point is that I have been working in this space, doing research and consulting for a long time. I do a lot of field research, so I've been out there and I've been in the field. And I think where my passion is, which is maybe a little bit more technical in nature, I would go out to a program just like I did yesterday, and you could see really good stuff being done. You could tell, you could see it in the kids' faces, in the staff faces. You could tell that good things were being done. And then my job as a consultant was to try to do an evaluation. And, all too often, there's no data. In other words, there is an opportunity to show the impact that was lost because the organization was so committed to the people that they weren't able to take a step back and to understand how the right data, and we'll get into that, is critical to sustaining your program. So I have a platform. I'm not running for anything, but I have a platform. Collaboration and accountability. Those are the two pillars. I'm thinking of adding a third, but we'll keep it at that for now. So collaboration, that's something I think you're all familiar with in the work that you do. And it reminds me, the same message that you give to the kids that come through your door. You're not alone. And I think that it's really critical that we understand who our co-laborers are, because again, part of the Beltway is we have all these agencies and we have these specific funds for this specific mission, and unfortunately, I don't know why this is, but the people that you serve do not fall neatly into our categories. And it's very frustrating, and I want you to do something about it, because it makes our jobs very difficult. But the point is, and you know this, everything is connected to everything. So one of the things that we want to start doing is to understand better what you're dealing with and to know how better to come alongside. But bear with us, because like I said, the Beltway doesn't necessarily understand what the real world's like. But we're doing our collaboration with Department of Education, OJJDP. We are trying to recognize at a macro level all of the connectedness. But what's going to be important, I think, is that these things be in parallel. So what we're trying to do, collaborating at a high level, we want to learn about what you're doing at a local level. And part of the communication flow is, we have the benefit of learning about the folks that you're collaborating with that are making your work better, and then that may trickle up to somebody we need to talk to at our level that can facilitate those collaborations even further. So the other collaboration is with us. We need to listen more about frontline concerns and barriers to effective program outcomes. You've got the regional staff, we've got RHYTAC, and we're going to be working very hard. I call myself a populist in the sense that I think that all the good ideas are with you guys. And what we need to do is to begin to facilitate a process of hearing that, listening that, and of course, this opportunity here, I mean, we could just sit back and watch. You guys are in the room, we could have just, that's all these next few days are about, are you guys talking with each other. But I think collaboration is also, we need to recognize, along with that, there are co-laborers out there that don't get RHY money. And you'll be hearing from some of those folks here. We're going to have someone from Association of Gospel Rescue Missions, somebody from Heartbeat International. These are people working with the same population. And I think ultimately, no, we don't have a bottom line, but what should constantly be in front of all of us, and I know it's in front of all of you, is how few resources we have in comparison to the enormity of the problem in front of us. And that, if nothing else, should be a motivation for more collaboration. I have Curtis Porter. Where are you, Curtis? Right here. Stand up. I call him collaboration guy. So you have license to go to Curtis and talk to him about organizations and people that you're collaborating with. And we want to learn more about that. We want to know, again, where the connections are. And then finally, at least for collaboration, I got to give enough time, I will. If I say something is important, I want to measure it. And collaboration, we've been talking with a gentleman from University of Denver, Darren Hicks. All he does is research collaborations. And he makes a very good point, which is you can't just evaluate a collaboration by, we all get along, we meet regularly, even we share resources. Ultimately, the benefit of collaboration needs to show in terms of your outcomes, because the better you collaborate, that means the more you're leveraging the investment, and obviously from our standpoint, we're talking about the FISBE investment. So I think it's important to, for us to start looking at ways to measure and learn about different types of collaboration, and let that be something that we start sharing in future conferences and through RHYTAC as well. Then the fun one. Everybody likes a collaboration. Accountability. Ooh. And let me just say this. And this is the creative tension here. Of course we want to end youth homelessness. In the work that I did, going across the country talking to almost 200 people, I saw, the same dedication and the passion and the energy. From my standpoint, I don't think we need a slogan to motivate us in that effort. My concern is the degree to which, in an effort to reach functional zero, are we sacrificing long-term outcomes for short-term outcomes? That's a concern I have. And I think along with that, when it comes to accountability, we need to start talking about outcomes. Outputs do not mean a whole lot. You know that. And we have to communicate to Congress, you're asking for this, but I think you want that. It's going to be a large effort. It's a messy effort. Outcomes are not easy to track, let alone outcomes for runaway and homeless youth. But we have to do it. There is no substitute for all of us having better knowledge of what happens to the people you serve. Where they are a year or two out from your program is the most important indicator of the value and impact of your work. In this striving for accountability, we need to avoid what's called errors of the third kind, and that's answering the wrong question precisely. So we need to take a look at all of that. The reason we need to do that, and again, I've been around long enough to see, you guys are doing good work. You guys are passionate about what you're doing. The problem that we have is you're a well-kept secret. And what happens is sometimes people start working in this space, they seem more organized. They have certain ways of communicating. They have models. They have data. Errors of the third kind data, in my opinion. But the point is that RHY has an important leadership role. But in order to have that leadership role, we have to articulate at my level, I have to be able to articulate better what you guys are doing. And it's going to be important. So when I talk about sustainability of your organizations, without getting overly dramatic, we have to think about sustainability of RHY. And the reason for sustainability of RHY is not for the sake of RHY, but for the sake of the youth that are being served. So I want you to think about that. I'm just throwing stuff out there that I want you to marinate on, and then Lori Jackson's going to figure out how to make it all work. Won't you, Lori? So with that, we need to redirect and reprioritize the flow and content of program data and outcomes back out to the field where it is most needed. I think what's happened is many of you have grown up in an environment where you treat data collection as compliance. And I don't blame you, because you've been in an environment where people ask you for data and you never see it back again. That has to change. We have the dashboard underway, but there are other challenges that are there as well. I'll be talking with some of you about issues relating to HMIS and data burden. It's one thing to have data burden, it's another thing to not even be able to use that data. We're going to be looking at the technical assistance to build your capacity to collect, manage, report, and use data. And we're going to do that, hopefully, with some degree of standardization so we can roll up information and present it where I am. But I want you to know that I think the data is needed where you are, because you are the ones that are doing the work, and you need to be in that transformation as outcomes-focused organizations. It's a long way to go. I've already spoken to some people that are already down that road, so there's a lot to do. And at some level, when it comes to the value of your organization, when I was a consultant, the process was pretty simple. I'd say, can I talk to your frontline people? And I have a simple question. What does success look like? All too often, researchers and evaluators, some of my best friends are PhDs, will go in and they will assume they know what you're doing. They assume they know what the outcomes are. And what I would like to see more is something that's built up from the ground up. You'll be hearing more about that during lunch and from a colleague of mine as well. And then finally, sustainability. So again, we're talking at the macro level, at the micro level. I need help in the sustainability of RHY, and we want to help you to assure the sustainability of your program. And the way we want to do that, and the reason that we're talking about outcomes, oh, and I didn't mention logic models. You're going to see logic models like you've never seen them before. This is not your father's logic model. Get used to it. But the point is that the logic models help us get to the outcomes, but we're not going to stop at the outcomes. We're going to monetize those outcomes. We're going to make projections on taxpayer savings, other types of savings associated with those outcomes. The end goal is for you to be able to communicate projected return on investment for your program. And the fun part is your development people will love it because it's a new opportunity to communicate your program. But I think what you're going to find is when you start to see the impact of your return on investment, you're going to want to improve it. That's going to turn you back to your logic model. It's going to turn you back to your outcome, saying, how can I get more of these? It's going to be a fun process. Don't be afraid if math is not your forte. We have enough people that know math to come alongside. So those are the things that I want to put out there. I'll be around, we'll be around. There's a lot to talk about. Take the opportunity here to renew, to re-energize, to connect. I think the best thing from the site visit was we went to one of the programs, and actually our funding is relatively small percentage of their overall program budget, but they love RHY. They love this conference because it's the only funding source that gives them the opportunity to talk to their colleagues, to hone their craft, and to feel connected. So I encourage all of you to make the most of this. And for the new people, I just have to say this. For some reason, when it comes to evaluating the room and the location and the hotel, you guys are more critical. So I don't know where you were before here, but I just thought that was interesting. So my final word to you all, I shouldn't say final for today. We are partners. Be presumptuous, but be ready to show your impact, and we will help you get there. Thank you. And I'm going to introduce our speaker. Almost forgot that. Dr. Cooper.
Thank you. I think I have a portable mic. Thank you very much. How are you all doing today? Great. So my name is Sharon Cooper, and I am a developmental and a forensic pediatrician. I've worked for several decades within the area of child maltreatment, as well as the impact of child maltreatment within the concept of the disruption of the neurodevelopment of children who have been abused or neglected. And today it's really an honor for me to be able to talk to you about the concept of running from or running to. Running from or running to. So this whole thought process of running from or running to really is a dynamic that we see when we think about the internet, social media, and all of the other aspects of technology and communication that are affecting our children today. And I think that the handheld projector, I'll just have to ask you to do the next slide if you can. Thanks. And I may have to do that throughout the whole presentation if I can't get it to work. I have served for the last 17 years as a consultant to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and I've been on their board for the last 10 years. And this is an agency that provides a lot of information that's very helpful for all of us who work with missing and exploited children or children who have run away or are thrown away children. Can I just have the next slide, please? I think it would be really good if we could get if you have a different pointer, that would be really helpful. If you have a different, that would be really helpful. This is the National Task Force on Defending Childhood, which met a few years ago under the auspices of Attorney General Holder, talking about children who've been exposed to violence. It was a very diverse task force, and what happened with that task force was that we traveled around the United States listening to testimonies regarding life and what had happened to many people who had been in really significantly negative circumstances. If you could hit the next slide. The outcome of that task force is this document, which can be downloaded from the internet, entitled Defending Childhood, Protect, Heal, and Thrive. And the next slide would also provide for us information about many of the facts that we gleaned from that task force, such as the fact of significant risk for suicidality. When I grow up, I'm going to be 12 times more likely to commit suicide because I've been exposed to violence. And violence is a common theme that we see in this situation. Thanks, I think it's working now. Let's first talk about the public perception in terminology. Runaway is a term that infers leaving voluntarily, and this is sometimes erroneous because many children are not necessarily running away voluntarily. Sometimes they feel that if they don't run away, they won't survive. So although there may be a mission on their part, it's really still very difficult for them. If you could hit the next. Thank you. Thrown away children, on the other hand, infers that youth have been unceremoniously thrown out. And there is a big difference, I often say, between runaways and children who are thrown away. Thrown away children are what I would refer to as abandoned children. They're not out there voluntarily. We don't call them abandoned children as much as we should, but that is how they are. Because when you're 13 years old, and like one of my Thank you very much. Hopefully this will be, thank you. Like one of the children that I evaluated, American children that I evaluated in Germany, when he was thrown out of this house at 13 years of age because his stepfather, who had sexually abused him for quite some time, was now done. And he then had to become, not because he was LGBTQ, but because he had to survive, he had to become what's referred to in Germany as a rent boy, where you hang out around gay bars in the hopes that someone will give you some money in exchange for sex. That's a thrown away type child, and they're totally not prepared for the fact that they're going to be out on the streets under those circumstances. The other thing that I want to say is that, now, let's see, I think that one doesn't work so well either. Okay, so the stage. Okay, all right. So sorry, let me find the right place to stand. Okay. Okay, thank you. Missing. I get my thought together again. Thank you. Missing, on the other hand, is an unrecognized end result of having been a runaway or having been a thrown away. And all three of these terms are relevant to what we're talking about today. Okay. So there's some key points about running. And they would be that here in the United States, there are 1.6 million children and 2.8 million have run away. Between 1.6 and 2.8 million children have run away from home. And youth have the highest risk for being homeless as compared to the entire homeless population, especially those youth who are between 12 and 17 years of age. There are a lot of reasons why youth leave. Sometimes they have school problems, they have peer problems, they have family problems, they have drug-seeking problems. But the most common reason, according to the research, are what are referred to as family issues. I think it is really helpful for us to be able to consider from the running perspective how difficult it is for children to have a reasonable plan. And I've hit it 3 times and nothing has happened, so I'm not sure. Thanks. So when we think about how challenging that is for us, we have to start by thinking about adverse childhood experiences. The adverse childhood experiences study, I think all of us are familiar with. It began from the Kaiser Permanente system in California back in 1999, and let us know that when children have had all the different types of child maltreatment, plus living in dysfunctional homes where you may have domestic violence, an incarcerated parent, substance abuse problems, children who've been in out-of-home care, etc., this disrupts your neurodevelopment. And as a developmental pediatrician, that's really relevant to me because when I see children that come into my clinic who've had any or many of these kinds of adversities, I'm really struggling and scurrying to try to make sure we bring into place early intervention services for them if they're less than 3, early in preschool. If they're over 3, I write letters to the school to talk about the issue that this child may present as inattentive in the classroom when in fact they have PTSD, and those intrusive thoughts are what make them appear to be inattentive. And so I try to advocate for individualized educational plans, et cetera, for them, so that we can try to avert the potential long-term outcomes of poor school performance and difficulties in society because of undereducation associated with childhood adversities. That's the first step. The other phases of the adverse childhood experiences study also helps us to know that these children are at risk for developing self-injurious behaviors, drinking, smoking, using drugs, self-mutilation, running away from home falls into that category. And the stresses that are so common in this whole dynamic then cause them to have a higher risk for chronic diseases, not just diseases such as mental health diseases, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, but physical diseases, especially autoimmune diseases such as lupus, erythematosus, and rheumatoid arthritis, the kinds of diseases where we can draw blood from you and find that you have antibodies to yourself. This is a factor related to the level of cortisol that is so prevalent in this particular form of victimization. These children then will grow up to have a higher risk for cancer and an earlier death. So if there's nothing else that we have learned so far about why we're here today and why it's important that we pay attention to these children and youth, is the fact that we will in the long term improve their quality of life. And that study's been replicated now in 22 other countries, and the results are still the same. So we have a new field of science now called neuroscience. Neuroscience refers to neurobiology, the fact that the elevated cortisol levels, which are our stress hormones in childhood, actually will begin to cause harm to your brain function. The whole area of epigenetics that lets us know from research that if you have been a victim of chronic child maltreatment, If you've been a victim of chronic child maltreatment, you have a higher risk of having changes to your actual chromosomes. And the part of the chromosome that changes is the end of the telomere, which is the part of the chromosome that is associated with earlier aging. That's really important, isn't it? In the olden days, didn't we used to say, you can tell from looking at her, she's had a hard life. Didn't we used to say that? Now we know that there's science that gives us the reason for that, because our actual genetics are changing because of these childhood adversities. The adverse childhood experiences part as well. But the R of neuroscience is resilience. And how do we build resilience in children and youth so that they will be able to do better and have a better quality of life? And that's one of the things that we are working on right now. That hypothalamus, you can't be a doctor and not have a slide like this, just so that you'll think I'm a real doctor, right? That hypothalamus in the brain sends those hormones to the pituitary gland right in the middle of your brain, which then goes to the adrenal gland, which is on top of your kidney, that kicks out that cortisol, and that cortisol comes back to the brain and hinders brain function and is problematic from that perspective. Another aspect of the impact upon the whole function is that epigenetic trauma causes not just what I just talked about with the telomere, but it also impacts upon family dynamics from generation to generation, the whole concept of intergenerational trauma. The research that we find in our American Indian and Alaskan Native cultures really underscores that. And also, we see that in the African American culture, where you see continued belief, particularly for those who are in rural parts and urban parts of our country, that the urban poverty that they live in is something they'll never be able to escape from. And that is another dynamic that will hinder their ability to have hope. Man never made any materials more resilient than the human spirit, and our spiritual input and impact upon youth cannot be underestimated. It's been a long time before we started recognizing the spirituality that our brothers and sisters across the waters in the Far East knew a long time ago, and that is that we are mind, body, and spirit. We can't ignore the spirit when we're trying to reach out to individuals to make a difference for them. If you haven't read this particular study, the Sexual Abuse to Prison Pipeline, the girl's story, I would recommend that you get that because it's very helpful to understand how it is that we have this overrepresentation of girls who end up in the juvenile justice system because their mental health problems related to having been sexually abused have not been addressed. So when you have a child who's been sexually abused, and they are in a family, as many families in our country are, who say, let's put this behind us, or it never happened, or what are you talking about? All of those kinds of things that make a child have to internalize the abuse that they have experienced. And then as they start to get older, they start to have what is referred to as acting out behaviors, but which are actually manifestations of post-traumatic stress disorder that we see in our military population every day. By the way, I retired from the military, so I really do know the military population pretty well. Thank you. We know that girls of color, of all colors, live at an intersection of systemic racism and classism and gender violence, and because of that, we have to advocate for them even more. So if you have youth who are runaway or thrown away youth who have had this history of child sexual abuse, we need to think about how can we help them, even if we don't have access to the perfect mental health services. Another recent study I would hope you would get a chance to see, it only came out in July, so you may not have seen it yet, is this study, Girlhood Interrupted, the Erasure of Black Girls' Childhood. It was done by the Georgetown Law Center on Poverty and Injustice. And what this study has shown is that there is an inherent bias that exists against girls of color, specifically African American girls. What they have shown is that these girls need, well, the belief is from the people who were, I'm sorry, could we go back to that one? The belief is from the many, many people who were surveyed was that black girls needed less nurturing, less protection. They didn't need to have as much support as other girls, didn't need to be comforted as much. They were more independent and they had more knowledge about sex than any other girls. And these were for girls as young as 5. For kindergartners, all the way up through the age of 14. That was the study population that was reviewed. So I encourage you to download this study because after I heard about this study, I decided to go to my church and have a human sculpture to express that to the congregation and how we in our community needed to go to our school systems because the point is that black girls have a much higher incidence of being brought into the juvenile justice system and suspended or expelled from school for the very same infraction that girls of other races may commit and do not have those types of outcomes. So when you think about your runaway population and your throwaway population, these are all dynamics that we need to be aware of. Why is it such a challenge for our girls? Girls more so than boys, because girls are entering into puberty at a younger age than ever. Starting from the 1960s, for every decade to the present, children, but girls especially, are entering into puberty 1 year earlier for every decade. So whereas in the 60s, little girls started having their periods at age 13 or 14, now they have their periods at 10. Breast development begins at 8 or 9. And discussing why that is another topic, but when you have a child who's 11 who has significant breast development and looks or has the body of an adult, the expectations upon first vision is you ought to know better. Because look, you're grown. Look at your body. That's what people will think. But we also know that the research has shown that even though their bodies are more mature, their brains are not. Not just their brains. No child's brain is really completely mature at that time. The research from Gotag and others in 2000 helped us to know from serial MRI studies that brain maturation starts at the back of the brain, illustrated here by the color blue, and gradually moves forward to the front part of the brain, so that the last part of your brain to actually completely mature is the prefrontal cortex, the home of good judgment, impulse control, all those things that we would like for you to be like when you're 11 because your body looks like you're grown. This is also a reason why we're so much more worried about our girls who are running away and the risk for domestic minor sex trafficking, because those bodies look like an adult body. Those bodies can be on Backpage.com, and everyone will think that she's 19, 20, or 21 when she's actually 12. And when I've evaluated more than 100 victims of domestic minor sex trafficking and international sex trafficking, and I can tell you that this is yet another dynamic that really makes what we do a challenge. There's another piece about our runaway and our thrown away population that we hadn't talked about in the past. You know, in the olden days, which might have been maybe 3 years ago, in the olden days, most of our literature said children who've had these types of adversities are children at high risk for PTSD, depression, and anxiety. But now we're beginning to understand that there's a different term that's more appropriate, and that's the term complex trauma. Complex trauma means that it's not behind you, that it's always right here, every single day. And this is particularly true when you have been a victim that involves information or communication technology. Internet crimes against children. We've learned a lot of lessons about how you do or do not get over being victimized when your victimization is in cyberspace. This is something that is very cutting edge for all of us who work with youth who have been victims of any type of childhood adversity, because complex trauma means that you're still in the moment. Some of my patients, for example, who have had abusive images made of them, something that we used to call child pornography, and whose images remain on the internet, enter into, junior high school and go into a biology classroom and see the human body and get up and walk out. They cannot accept thinking about that because they are remembering that pictures of their body are on the internet and people are looking at them every day, downloading, trading, and possessing those images. And in our country, if in fact you are a known victim, I know who this child is, then every time John Q. Public gets arrested with a whole cache of child abuse images, also known as child pornography, we're trying to step away from that term, child pornography, she, my victim, has a right to know that someone else has victimized her by downloading her images. So therefore, she's living at home with her parents maybe, or maybe a runaway, or maybe in foster care because it was her parents who were abusing her and making those images in the first place. And she gets a letter every time someone is convicted of having her images on the internet. In one case that we made a documentary on this, and in one family where I interviewed the mother's infant daughter had been abused in this manner at 7 months of age until she was 3. The child is now 17, and the mother has received more than 12,000 notifications that her images are still being traded by others. She gets them every week. So complex trauma is a new kind of issue that we haven't thought about, and we have to be looking at our mental health care providers to become knowledgeable about how to really attack this newer form of dynamic that we see in children. Let's see if I can. This is a new study, and the bottom of it is cut off because of the closed caption, so I want to tell you the name of the study, and it's called the Survivor Survey. This is a study from Canada, but it is an international study. The United States was certainly a part of that, and it is the outcome study now of children who have images on the internet. Whether those images came from sexting, or whether they came from internet crimes against children, how do these children do and how does it affect them? And the effect is profound. And one of the big things about this survey that is really compelling is that in asking now older than 18-year-old survivors whose images have been on the internet and may remain on the internet, in asking the question, did you feel you had reasonable or adequate mental health support? What do you think the answer was? Absolutely, because talking about how to treat a child who has had this kind of victimization is not yet at the collegiate level in psychology classes. It's not even yet at the master's level in psychology classes. So if we're not teaching that to our students today, how will they be prepared to deal with this thousands, really frankly millions of children who have images on the internet. So this is really a challenge for us. And sometimes children run away not because they don't love their family, but sometimes in this situation where images on the internet, children run away just to get away from it all. Just like, I can't take it, I can't take the school, I can't take the demands, I just can't take it, so they just run away. We know that the majority of runaway kids who've called the National Runaway Safeline within 3 weeks would have left. 75% would call within 3 weeks, but 44% call within 1 to 3 days. And once they're on the street, more than 50% of these youth who run report surviving with the help of family members or friends or relatives. But there are a lot of other common means, such as survival sex, stealing, selling drugs, or staying in shelters. I was thinking just recently about, in my community, noticing that a heavily wooded, though still in the city, corner was being cleared for some business that they're going to build. And so the tractors and everything were cutting down all the trees all the way deep into this piece of land. And as I was driving down the street, I just glanced over, and what kind of didn't really shock me, but ought to really be in everybody's radar, was this little small tent that was back in the middle of that wooded lot that the people who were clearing the lot came upon. And in the tent, around the tent, were items of old clothing and things that we know our youth use sometimes when they run away. One of the major churches in our community has a heavily wooded lot across the street, and part of their mission is to go into the woods in that lot to take food for the youth that they know are living in tents in that lot. Those are runaway youth in our community, and that's where they stay, in the woods. It's a real wake-up call for us to understand how this impacts kids who are trying to survive on the streets or not. So we're familiar with the terms CSEC and DMST. CSEC is commercial sexual exploitation of children, and DMST is the domestic minor sexual trafficking of children. CSEC was a term that was given to us in 2001 by Dr. Richard Estes from the University of Pennsylvania School of Social Work, and is an internationally accepted term now. There have been 3 world congresses on the commercial sexual exploitation of children. It was in 2004 in our country first that ECPAC USA wrote a paper that really shamed America and helped us to understand that at that time in 2004, all of the money in our country that was going towards assisting commercially and sexually exploited children went to foreign national children. If you were an American child, not a penny was going to facilitate your recovery and your rehabilitation. And it was ECPAC who wrote that paper that finally made its way up to our congressional halls to say, this was an oversight. Because of course, if you were an international victim and you were found dancing in a strip club, we would have services for you to help you. If you were an American child and you were found dancing in a strip club, you went to juvenile detention. Do you all remember that? Oh, most definitely. And so it took a lot for us to, wake up and realize we just have to get it right. If you're a victim and your last name comes from the Ukraine, you're a victim if your last name comes from Kankakee, Illinois. You're still a victim. So that brings us to that whole category of missing from care. You all remember the case of the child named Aurelia, who was a 5-year-old who was in foster care in Florida, and it was discovered was actually missing from that foster care home, but was never reported missing. This was the landmark, I would say, case that sort of woke up of America about the fact that there are children missing from care, children for whom foster care parents are collecting money every day, but the child is not with them because the child has either run away, been thrown away, or has been murdered. And so missing from care is yet another area that we have to pay attention when we're really thinking about runaway, or we're thinking about thrown away children. Some of the research that we have from the FBI is that sometimes girls are picked up, quote, as runaways around group homes, but there's a mole in that group home who has set it up for someone to always drive their car in that neighborhood, give you a heads up, it looks like she might run away this evening. And so when that child is pushed, they don't just voluntarily do this. They're bullied and they're treated in a manner that makes them feel like, I'm not going to stay here any longer. When that child is pushed out of that group home, there just happens to be this car in the neighborhood with a nice guy in it that says, hey, do you want to work for tips? Do you all understand how organized these types of situations can be? And it's not by chance. So we have to start thinking now a little bit more outside the box when we think about children who are missing from care. There's a lot of data about how many kids are out there. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC as it is often referred to, has reported that 1 out of 6 runaways that were reported in 2016 were likely to be victims of sex trafficking. This meant that you will have plenty of children who have either run away from care or have been thrown away from care, and in fact are out there still with individuals who are waiting to pick them up. I want to give you a case that I had in Alaska. I've been to Alaska several times with respect to sex trafficking victimization. And the last time that I was there, almost every victim, there were 14 victims of two men who were traffickers, also known as pimps. Why were there 2? Because they were good cop, bad cop type traffickers. So the good cop was the finesse guy who, I love you all, and the bad guy was the really brutal guy who would beat them up. So therefore they would come to the good guy who they didn't recognize as a trafficker as, why does he treat us this way? And he would be so nice to them, but it didn't change the fact that they were being sent out every night to the Captain Cook Hotel or transported across town to another high-end hotel, to men who were coming down from the pipeline in order to spend their money that they were making from the pipeline work for underage minors that they were purchasing for sex. And the majority of the youth that I evaluated on this last case that I worked in came from Covenant House, which is right in the heart of downtown Anchorage, 4 blocks from JCPenney's. And these girls would typically come walking out, always in 2s, because they were supposed to not walk by themselves, going just downtown for a little bit, and there would be a nice car that would drive up, and a handsome guy would, then say, hey, I have a job for you, and you can work for tips. You look like you would be great to work in my restaurant, or someplace like that. And these homeless girls would get into the car, and no one would see them anymore.
Human trafficking is a crime that takes away souls, to take away memories. My trafficker was someone who knew my family. I was given specific instructions. You're going to do what I ask you to do. If you know, your mom and your 3 brothers in Honduras are going to die. So I allowed one crime to happen, so another crime wouldn't. A neighbor reported that so many people were coming in and out of the house. Then that's how I was rescued. Most people didn't understand what was I going through.
Boys are traditionally under-recognized and underserved. They don't have specific residential treatment homes where they can go. They may go to shelters, but they don't have the same services that girls do. And I think across the country, more and more, there's an awareness that this absolutely has to be addressed.
I was kicked out of my parents' home because of my sexual orientation. And in a lot of ways, it really conditioned me for being very vulnerable.
It took a long time for us to understand that actually these were exploited youth, typically very vulnerable youth who have been in foster care or homeless or runaway youth. And once we began to understand how easily they could be groomed and recruited by offenders, we then began to recognize that these were children who were being exploited.
Children who have been trafficked, both for actually sex and labor trafficking, are more vulnerable for a variety of reasons. Obviously, their age, their developmental capacity, they're more easily manipulated, and traffickers know that.
I was born in Ecuador. When I was 16, my stepsisters told my dad that it would be a good idea if I will come here. They say she could help with one baby while I work. and then she would go to school in the afternoon. I never ended up going to school. I was home 24 hours with the baby, and then little by little, she started telling me to cook, to clean. I wasn't getting paid. I was monitored everything that I did. I felt trapped without no exit. And it made me feel that they were doing something great by giving me food and giving me a place to be. And the way that I had to pay them back is doing everything for them.
There are professionals that are already working in the field with trafficking victims. Child welfare agencies, child protection workers, juvenile justice professionals, including attorneys, judges, guardian ad litems, court-appointed special attorneys, case managers, social workers, or foster care systems, school counselors. Some victims of trafficking are going to school. In fact, their traffickers pick them up at the end of the day.
Any young person is vulnerable. And one of the biggest predictive variables is a young person who has been sexually abused.
Child sexual abuse, human trafficking, most people, think of them as separate, and I think there's much more overlap.
Before we talk about the reason that you're here today, I want to tell you a couple of things.
We need to have a well-coordinated response that cares for the well-being of the child. At child advocacy centers, we always are looking at to the possibility that other things may have occurred. The civic purpose of the forensic interview is to gather as much factual information from the child's perspective, and it's part of a broader multidisciplinary team related to the investigation. Children who were in our treatment program last year on average had 8.5 different victimizations. Not until we really find out what the child has experienced can we truly provide them help.
There are many challenges in serving this population. People don't understand the complex nature of this victimization.
To describe the relationship between the trafficker and the victim is a domestic violence situation. There's this connection to the abuser.
In many cases, children will return to the trafficker and they're not ready to get out of the life at that point, and it may be months before they are, years even. But if we can establish some trust with the child, maybe that'll make them open up next time and bring them a little bit closer to making the decision to leave.
The types of services that these victims need, of course, are trauma-informed, are comprehensive. They need time and therapy to understand their victimization.
Making sure we connect them with a safe place to live, but also a quality